welcome back to another episode of Lush Life No Labels, a podcast where I talk about the struggles and joys of self improvement, anywhere from relationships, career, wellness, and more. I'm Fatu. Do you always feel like you have something to clean around the house? Well, according to a great philosopher, life truly begins only after you have put your house in order. This great philosopher is actually just a quote by Marie Kondo, who inspired today's podcast episode and is my story of the week. Of course, if you've heard of Marie Kondo, you know she's not actually a philosopher, but that quote to me is pretty philosophical. For those of you who don't know who Marie Kondo is, she became famous for developing a method called the KonMari method, which encourages tidying and cleaning by category instead of by location. Most people tend to start cleaning up their homes by starting with different locations. You might say, okay, I'm going to start by cleaning the bathroom, and then I'll move into the living room, and then I'll clean my bedroom. But Marie Kondo recommends beginning with your clothes and then moving on to books, papers, any miscellaneous items, and then finally, items that you consider sentimental. Overall, she encourages people to only keep items that spark joy. And I've never really cleaned that way before, but when I heard this, I thought it was an interesting and mindful way to look at cleaning. I grew up in a household where cleanliness was emphasized, especially when it came to cleaning the house and also being a clean person overall. So, what does that mean? Of course, in terms of cleaning myself, standard showers, brushing teeth, etc. But also, since I grew up in a Muslim household and we prayed, we'd need to get ready for each prayer. That meant before each prayer, we would do the purification ritual essentially. And that is important in Islam because you want to be in a state of physical and spiritual purity when you pray. This involves washing your hands, mouth, nose, face, arms, head, and feet in a very specific order. So I was cleaning a lot, especially washing my hands a lot, which I still do probably out of habit. Also, in our house, we wore no outside shoes. Instead, we'd wear slippers or shower shoes. I actually liked that because it made it easier to clean the floors, and there would not be as much gunk on the floors as there would be if we wore shoes around the house. Now, in terms of cleaning the house, from a young age, I started cleaning up around the house. That was more of a requirement, not a choice, but it did teach me some valuable skills. I would clean the bathroom, kitchen, the dishes, floor, and I mean putting soap in a bucket, getting on all fours, and scrubbing the floor. I got used to doing that a couple times a week. It was essentially clean up when something gets messy instead of waiting until it gets piled up. We typically had items to put away, and my mother was actually a big proponent of throwing things away. So our house was pretty minimalist and there was not a lot of clutter. Actually, that reminds me, back in the day, there was a TV show, I think it was on MTV or TLC, called Hoarders that we would watch. And my mom would be very stressed out each time because she couldn't imagine how those people's homes became so cluttered to a point where they had no open space on the floors to even walk around. That show was crazy though, and those people needed some serious help, which is probably why they were on the show. I think it was kind of an intervention type of show where someone's daughter or brother or friend would call the show and say, "Hey, I know this person who's a hoarder. please come and help them. And then the people of the show would come in with all these cameras and try to get the hoarder to throw away all of these things, but they would never want to part with them, even though they weren't using it, even though it was piling up everywhere. And for some of the people, it actually became a health issue. Anyways, my house was not like that though, and I got pretty used to being minimalist growing up at home. In high school and college, where I lived in dorms, at least in high school, everyone would have a chore related to cleaning up common spaces. And of course, you were responsible for your room, especially if you had a roommate. Also, in high school, we were all on snow duty to shovel when it snowed a lot because it was in the northern part of Massachusetts. And back then, we actually had real winters. So it would be snowing much more frequently than it does now. My peers and I all had different backgrounds, so I'm sure we varied in how many chores we did growing up. But at that school, everyone had to chip in since we lived together and shared those common spaces. It was also a time where it was many people's first times doing laundry and other things like that. That happened for us early on in high school, but for most people in the US at least, their first time figuring out how to be tidy away from home was in college. In college, we were not supervised that much, or at least not as much as in high school. So ultimately, your cleanliness depended on you. In the dorms, some people kept their rooms clean while others had clothes and just materials everywhere. If anyone has ever gone to a frat party and been in those houses, you know they're not the cleanest. And many of those floors were super sticky too. So, really, in college, things were a hit or miss depending on how clean you were, how clean the people on your floor were. When I graduated from undergrad, was really the first time I was responsible for my own adult apartment. There wasn't too much to clean because I didn't have many things, but the common areas were the biggest. At that time, my roommate and I cleaned, but not really on a strict weekly basis. If we had a get together, we would clean up or we would clean up our own messes, but generally, both of us did everything. Though at that time in my life, things were a mess. So, physically, mentally, emotionally, I was struggling, and my living space reflected that. It was not the way that I was taught growing up. I got lazy and wouldn't fold my clothes really. I would just pick them up from the clean clothes pile. I'd leave jackets laying around. I even had a chair where I'd throw stuff onto instead of putting them away. Oh, actually, leave me a comment if you've ever had a clothes chair. I know some other friends of mine who, at some point in their lives, had a clothes chair. It was just easier to put things on there. That time was definitely a mess. My mother would not be pleased if she saw my room and my living space at that time. I just sort of went in and out, but I didn't really focus on cleaning. It just was not on top of mind for me. I feel like I was dealing with some other stressors of life. And for me, it really showed a reflection on how my life was at the time. I was worrying and stressing about so many other things that my cleanliness suffered. Like in Marie Kondo's quote that I stated at the start of this episode, I needed to get my house in order. But in order to get my house in order, I needed to get my mind in order and the rest of my life in order. And I think it reflected it because I wasn't feeling good about myself, and cleaning was just so much work for me at the time. It just felt like something that was so challenging that I just could not bring myself to do it as well as I knew I should have. And it wasn't like I had just trash everywhere, but compared to the way that I grew up and compared to the way that I like to have my living space, to me, it wasn't up to the standard that I like to have for myself. I started building better cleaning habits though after that. And even when I had roommates, we would actually make sure to split chores. For example, I lived in an apartment where we had a weekly cleaning schedule. So one week I would be taking out the trash and my roommate would clean the bathroom. And then the next week we would switch. or if we needed some household items, we would sort of switch off on who bought what, especially when it was items that we were sharing together. I really liked that because it kept me accountable not only for that chore, but it also motivated me to keep other things clean as opposed to just winging it. Scheduling really helped me because I'd say, oh, okay, this is my job this week. When I see the trash fill up, I'm going to just take that out and not just leave it because I'm not the only one living here. So if it gets messy and dirty, I am accountable for that. And I'm going to have to face that with someone else as part of the equation. As I was really trying to figure out what type of cleaning am I going to do or what type of person will I be, it was really helpful for me to have that type of accountability so that I would not fall back into laziness, frankly. One thing I mentioned that was hard for me though was figuring out when to clean. So, of course, over these years, I've gotten better at figuring out what my cleaning style is and how I like to live in my apartment. One of the things that has always been difficult for me is figuring out when to clean. Because I don't know, I always feel like I'm cleaning something because I might wash the dishes, but then I eat that same day and then now there are dishes. It's like, did I even clean? So sometimes I do it in parallel. For example, when I cook, I've found it's easier to clean some dishes or some pots as I go along instead of putting it right into the sink because it's one less thing to worry about. Or on the days that I know there's trash pickup, I take my trash out and put it next to the door because it makes me less likely to forget it when I'm leaving that morning. It also makes it easier not to pile up because for me, cleaning isn't the funnest thing to do. However, if I allow something to pile up, that actually gives me more work than I would have had to clean. So I've found that it's actually better for me to just do it at the time or not let it go too crazy. Otherwise, I'm actually just going to be in a worse place than I would be otherwise. Another thing that I've had to figure out is laundry because I've done laundry for years. That's not a new thing. But laundry is so tedious to me compared to some other things to clean because doing the washing, fine. Washing, drying, that's not the biggest deal. But then you have to fold it. And guys, I am not a fan of folding. I like to hang clothes up, but for some reason, I don't like to fold them. Is that weird? Maybe, but that's just me. I'm sure we all have some parts of cleaning. Maybe you don't like to clean the bathroom for whatever reason, right? So I think we all have different things that we like or dislike about cleaning. Some things are really, really tedious, but yeah, for me, I don't know what it is, but laundry just does not excite me. One thing I've started doing though, which has made it a little easier, not perfect though, is when I'm folding my clothes, I'll just play something. So maybe a video on YouTube or a TV show just to make the time pass as I'm walking back and forth, folding and then putting things away in the closet. It's made it a little easier because at least I have some entertainment through the whole thing, but it's been tough. Oh, another thing that I've tried to do with the laundry thing is cleaning more frequently, washing clothes more frequently. So I work out a few days a week, and instead of waiting until the weekend to clean, sometimes I'll just do some laundry in the middle of the week because it's much easier for me to fold a few clothes than to fold a whole thing. So those are some ways I've tried to deal with the whole thing. It has to be done, right? I think the thing with cleaning is that it has to be done, especially as an adult. We don't really have excuses not to clean. You know, it's just one of those things that it's just being an adult. We can't really get around it. And it's nice to have a clean space, in my opinion. If you're like me, you probably clean up weekly and likely multiple times a week. I don't do a whole house cleaning every week. Like I said, I'll clean things throughout the week. It makes it a little easier and it sort of breaks it up for me. Some things I'll clean more than once a week, like the kitchen. If I am cooking throughout the week, then I'm likely cleaning throughout the week. It really just depends on what it is that I have to do. Some other people pick one day of the week where they're going to do everything. They'll say, okay, on Friday I might be too tired, but Saturday or Sunday, I'm going to spend most of that day running errands and cleaning the bathroom, my bedroom, the kitchen, whatever else needs to be cleaned. To each their own. I don't think there's a right way to do things. It really just depends on your schedule, how much energy you have to do something, and how critical it is to have that thing be clean. Also, depending on how many people you live with, some tasks can be divided. I know people who each had their own chore growing up with their parents or siblings, and that was the thing they were responsible for. As I mentioned, when I've had roommates in the past, or if you have roommates currently, you may split chores when it comes to the common areas like the kitchen or the bathroom, but everything else is your responsibility, including your room and your meals. In these cases, there is more accountability because you don't live alone, and it's a responsibility, especially as adults, for us to respect everyone's use of those common spaces. If you live by yourself, then everything is on you. And that can be a lot sometimes, but maybe you have your own way of doing things to make it easier for you. One time, actually, a roommate of mine hired a cleaning service and they did a really good job. Sure, it costs money, but I can see why people opt in to have a cleaning service. Of course, the frequency of having them come in once a week, bi-weekly, or monthly is up to you. It all depends on how hands off you want to be with cleaning your space or even how much space you have to clean up. I know that's another option that we have now, and they do a great job. And if you don't have a lot of time on your hands or you just don't enjoy cleaning, but you have the disposable income to pay someone to do it, then hey, you should. That's an option. Just like how people can have their groceries delivered. Like with anything else in life, I sometimes leave dishes in the sink or I let my laundry pile up. But hey, it can be like that, especially when I'm tired from other things or I just don't have the energy for it. Things can go on the wayside. Sometimes we don't have an aversion to cleaning. Sometimes things just start piling up. But what do you do then? When I have a big mess and I don't know where to start, I take it one task at a time. Usually something small like making my bed or washing some dishes. And I'm going to repeat that. It's just making my bed or washing some dishes, not all the dishes. Picking something I can do every day can help build a habit. And even if it's a slow process, at least I can see some progress. When it's a big pile of dishes and I'm thinking, oh, I really just can't do this right now, washing a few dishes at least gets something started and it helps me feel better. I'm like, okay, great. At least I've done something. At least I've been a little bit productive. But something that is already clean is also easier to keep clean. So it saves me time in the future. You could also decide to set aside 15 minutes a day to do some cleaning and tidying because that can give a sense of accomplishment as well. It's really just seeing some of that slow progress. Like I said, as I've gotten older, I've figured out my groove of things when it comes to cleaning. I know I am someone who likes order around the house. So if I don't want to get annoyed with myself, then I got to clean and tidy it up. If I don't like papers all over my desk or shoes all on the floor, then I got to put those away and I got to tidy up. I value living in a neat and tidy space. Maybe a little too tidy compared to some other people, but hey, that's just me. But like I said, there are times where I have dishes in the sink or I let my laundry pile up. It happens to all of us. Life is a whirlwind. Sometimes we just don't have time. Maybe you were on vacation and you just got back and then there's this cleaning. Maybe you have children and there's just a lot more things to clean. You got to clean up their messes, your messes. It's a lot. Maybe you had a party and now you have to clean up all the things from the guests that you had. And I've talked about cleaning myself and keeping my space clean where I live, but it's also important for me to keep my neighborhood clean. Because no, I don't live and sleep outside, but I live in the neighborhood. It's part of my home, or at least that's how I see it. You guys have heard me talk on here before about my involvement in neighborhood cleanups. I walk around a lot and I am bothered internally when I see litter. So when I saw the opportunity to get involved in something around my neighborhood, I decided I wanted to spend time doing that. And it makes me happy to walk in cleaner streets. Just like it makes me happy to have a clean home that I can come to. And I know I'm getting older too, because instead of just using all purpose cleaner for all of my cleaning, I'm now expanding to learn about, oh, where can I use hydrogen peroxide and baking soda to get rid of stains instead of the all purpose cleaner or a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. Either way, we don't all have the same standards about how we want to live, and we all may have different definitions of what it means to be tidy and clean. What's important is to know ourselves and to know what works for us. What schedule works for us? Do we live with other people? What does our neighborhood look like? And do we want to be part of the change to keep that clean? Ultimately, my assumption is that we'd all be somewhere in between Marie Kondo and not being a hoarder. I will wrap it up there today, but one question I do have for you is there one thing or a collection of things in your place at the moment that you don't actually need anymore? If you answer yes to that, maybe you should consider getting rid of it and making room for something else that you would rather have. Or don't replace it with anything at all and keep a more minimalist space. It's all up to you. Thanks for listening to another episode of Lush Life No Labels. Cheers to your lush life and see you later.